And good evening, welcome to another edition of Life is People. Well, before we go any further, as most conversations, we had a great sort of going live conversation. So I want to before we go any further, how are you doing tonight, Meg?
I'm fine, thank you. we did have a bit of a good old natter before we
Well,
came on the air, didn't we, about stuff?
Exactly. Well, it's this kind of really kind of start this off as a really kind of the focus point where we want to start with, because we were both discussing how, quite strangely, how we seem to have missed each other on various platforms, because we're both on Minds. We were just discussing. We both kind of joined it about the same time, but we seem to have same sort of connections on Minds and stuff, but we haven't really met. And we were comparing that to Facebook, and a reason I wanted to I think it's a really good place to start this with, because I think I think you were speaking about it quite eruditely about this thing about how do you migrate people who are almost transitory and stuck in a mindset of they want to be on a platform, even though, this is one of the things I was going to say to you, I know people who are on Facebook who detest Facebook but do not want to leave it. And you say to me, okay, well, there's better ways like Minds and Example, and try to put, but they just, like you were quite rightly saying, they don't want to shift their mindset. And I don't understand. I can understand normal, for want of a better word, the average day Joe being like that. But creative people who, like I say, understand the weaknesses and the fallibilities of Facebook are sometimes the most intransigent, who don't want to come off. So I don't know. I think it's a good point to sort of start off with, and maybe hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I find that a lot, actually. That's really interesting you say that, because I speak to these really intelligent, and not just intelligent without wisdom, but with wisdom and knowledge, and they're saying, we're just having a general chat, and they're saying, I hate Facebook. It's just the same thing every time, and people are really sad, and they post these sad statuses, and just going on this real rant, and I'm saying there is an alternative. And even at that point, I'll go in really gently and say, look, there's a brilliant alternative. There's a brilliant new social media platform, minds.com. You can just come on in, and I sort of explain and highlight how they can come in gently, and all the benefits of that platform, what it's got to offer that Facebook hasn't got. So I'm going, and they some of them start off quite excited about it, and they might come on, think, oh yeah, I'm going to come on board with that. And then I've noticed some people, then they just kind of tail off, and it's like there's this real, what's the word I'm looking for? Fear of leaving the comfort zone. It's like people have become so kind of entrenched in the Facebook culture that they kind of run their entire lives from it, that they become, it's that whole thing, like when you see people say, oh, I'm leaving Facebook for a bit, I've had enough of it. It's just, I need to have a life. I need to just open my eyes and look at the trees and the birds. They come out with all these dramatic things. And then they deactivate their account, which kind of it's not really the same thing. It's just like pressing a button. And then sometimes you see them reappear about a week later. They've had their week's holiday from Facebook, and then they come back. But the point being, there does seem to be this hold that Facebook has over people, like it's got some sort of superpower that once people are plugged into it's the Matrix, isn't it? Once people are plugged in, they can't get out. So yeah,
Absolutely, and I think this is. This is kind of the root of. Not particularly Facebook, but Facebook is a great example of this. I think one of the things that you spoke upon there, and I think is very relevant to what you just said, is I think there's so many people, and I talk particularly about creators because we're two artists, and it's not many times I get to sit down and talk to a real artist. So I'm gonna when I say the we, I mean generally creative people.
yeah.
But I think even generally creative people, I think they still love that echo chamber stuff, and I think that's what Facebook plays on. And we found this out the last few months about how Facebook are, playing with algorithms and stuff to give people what they want to hear. And I think this is what I'm trying to say. You hear many creative people, and I said it for a while. I think they talk a good game. They like to talk about how they're, well, I'm not. I've taken, I'm outside the matrix, and I live this. And then you actually realise that, like you say, when it comes to simple things like Facebook, they don't want to walk away. And I think this comes down to because they're afraid of walking out of their echo chamber. They're afraid of having people they can either troll or people they can go in there and just going to support whatever they say.
Yeah.
And I think it's this this deep fear that people have inside themselves of not being in a collective. I think that's the fear, because we've been told, we've always been fed this thing about we're all part of a bigger group, and it's that feel like I love
tribal. It's a bit like Tim. It's like the football culture. It's very tribal, isn't it? It's very, everybody has their own team, and they have their own songs for their own team, and they shout the songs and the chants, or you could even call them mantras, football mantras. They shout them across to the other team. It's all about having a feeling like you belong in a tribe, which obviously you can go right back sort of thousands of years, and there would have been that whole thing about having tribes, and you would have had nomads, and you would have had settlers and warriors. In terms of the three, I think you would have had three basic groups of warriors, settlers, and nomads. And it's kind of the same now in the present day. So people feel they need to belong to something. It makes them feel safe, and it gives that they like to have some kind of idea of who they are. They like to have an identity, which is a lot to do with the propagation of the labels, like religion, class system, to some extent, even genders now. Even genders, it's like, well, that could be another thing we could go into more detail on another occasion. But people feel the need to have an identity, which goes right back to their name, their Christian name. When they're born, they have a Christian name, they're registered on a birth certificate. And that then becomes the basis of their identity. And then obviously whatever evolves from there is then added on as an attachment to sort of build on who they are as an identity. And I think anything that threatens the identity of who they believe they are as an individual, which you and I would probably both agree that their consciousness having a human experience in a human vehicle, a physical body. But in terms of the physical world, a physical realm that we all exist on, anything that would threaten their identity, so their name, their class system, their religion, anything that would mean that they would have to perhaps step outside of that box of reality what they decode as reality, is terrifying for them. So even if they can see on one level that there's something about their existence and what's happening that isn't making them feel fulfilled or happy, and then somebody offers them an alternative, they may sort of listen on one level, but then they might then go into some kind of cognitive dissonance mode where they can't really fully understand everything you're saying to them, or they're not fully absorbing everything because there's too much programming, in their sort of social standing, which is partly nature and partly nurture, depending on their life as they've, since growing from a child and everything, and what institutions they've been subjected to, school systems, etc., and religions and all the rest of it. So yeah, I think it's boils down to the old fear thing again, isn't it? It's, the fear of what people might think of them, fear of looking stupid, or fear of losing their social standing, or fear of loss. I think a lot of it boils down to. But the fear is pretty much the same thing as the ego part of the human. So it's all about, the ego part of the human is fight or flight. So if you're in a situation where you feel threatened in some way, you have some sort of method to preserve your life or preserve your it could be that if somebody says to you, I thought that piece of artwork you did was garbage, because it was just like a kid drew it or whatever. Some people might be really offended by that. It might be like, oh my God, I can't. But the reality is, if you're really, really offended and you can't get over it, it's just your ego that's kind of allowing you to be concerned to that extent as to what they've said to you about. Maybe that wasn't a great example, but I think that's what it is. It's the fear of the unknown as well. Fear of the unknown, of going into some new realm, and then the potential for failing or looking stupid, I think, is a big one for people. You know,
I
so I think
no, I totally concur with you, and I expect, and I'm quite open to say, so I speak from personal experience. I think I've said this for a long time in my life. I think that this is probably the compassionate element of, I think, of all, you know, I think of many people, is they can understand that it's, I think, one of the most difficult processes any human being can go through is to deprogram themselves. And I especially say for people, you know, being brought up in our culture, that, you know, from the, and I, you know, this is the other side of it, and I don't particularly want to go in this another conversation completely, but you realize that, like you said, like you eruditely spoke upon, you know, we're stamped from the moment we enter this planet. We're given a name, and from that moment on, we've been programmed. So it's understandable to the nth degree why people think, oh, okay, it's really hard to deprogram, because they see people, you know, and that's what I say, I speak myself. I spent, I know, hey, it was a year in my life, and it was one of the hardest things I had to get rid of all the deep, you know, religious stuff you've been taught, and you realize how deep this stuff goes into your actual psyche, and how much it's been. Now, hey, when people see that and they think, oh, the consequences of that means you're going to be an outsider, you're going to be alone, or you're going to get, you know, be left as a, you know, like, for want of a better word, as you said, nomad. People can quite rightly think, oh, there's a danger in being nomadic, because again, we're talking biology. I mean, if you look at the human species, it's you know, generally we all stick together in groups because there's safety in numbers versus the ones that go off and wander by themselves. So you can understand where this is all so deeply broken into people. So I've got every compassion. But yet, and this is the duality I have as a creative person all the time, is I feel, well, hey, as much as I understand completely all the reasons why they're telling me they don't want to step out of it and they're fearful, and I can understand a little bit of it, I still think, you've only got one shot. And what is the point? And this is where I kind of fall between that, like, I feel really compassionate, but element, I feel like it's, and someone gave me a great example the other day. They said, like, if a boat goes down and we, and I don't spend my being myself to learn how to swim and save people, if that boat goes down, we're all buggered. But if I've done that, then at least I've got a chance of saving someone. And you start to feel this about a lot of people. You think, I feel this a lot, particularly about creative people. I think, well, okay, you tell me about how fearful all things are and stuff, but you can take the choice and move out of this. And and the reason I say it's a duality I find all the time is because I know so many people personally around the world who would, and I say it so many times, and I don't care how on PC this sounds, but we're so lucky we're in the first world. And there's people I know who are walking 4 or 5 miles to get water a day. And these are, you know, young girls at 10, 11 doing this every day. And then you have people who are going, oh, well, I'm afraid to follow my own passions and my own thoughts and think about things. You think, really? Really, you've been fortunate enough to be born in this part of the world where you've got even the philosophical point to sit down and discuss it yourself, but you don't want to carry it through. And the reason I feel this duality is because I think unless people will stand up, then we're just going to continue going on and on and on and on and on. It becomes difficult and harder for everyone but behind that to stand up. So I think it's crucial. I've always said this. I think it's crucial when I see people who have kind of, for want of a better word, woken and seen things what they are. They haven't. Those people haven't got the right to stand in a corner and just go, well, I've seen the truth and I'm just going to shy away and carry on my normal life and like hold it all in myself. Surely you have the right to, just by living, show to other people and say to them, hey, that fear is just a construct of your own mind. There is nothing more than that. And you can not only break through that, but you will become a far more, you know, raising your own potential as a human being by going through that process. As that to happen, we need people to stand up and show that. I mean, that's a very long-winded kind of duality of my mind as an artist, but I don't know how your thoughts on that and how you know, whether you chime in with that or not.
I feel that I actually think that creativity, people when they say I'm going on this creative journey, and then people that say they're going on a spiritual journey, I think they're the same thing. Because but there's all these umbrella titles, you know, you've got, but I think, to be honest with you, I think you have to be careful with all these labels like New Age, and because people can become too far in one direction. You know, if you're, for example, if you're completely obsessed with the New Age to the point that you disregard everything else, that is a religion by definition, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't have a problem with labels, because I think people do need, to some extent, some kind of a label, so they can have a, when they're on that journey, and they are still well, we're all learning constantly, the learning never ends. But if you're starting a particular journey on something, then perhaps you might need a label initially to sort of grasp or encapsulate of something at that point before you go on to something else, if that makes sense. So I think that people, to some extent, need the labels, but I think they can also be very crippling to your further expansion of whatever it is you're learning. And I always say to people, because I've actually only been painting, doing art publicly for 15 years, but I've not, you know, I didn't sort of, as I call it, coming out of the artist's closet. I didn't actually do that until 15 years ago. And people, you know, people are still really frightened to do that. And I said, the beauty of art is that it doesn't matter what you create or how good you think you are or how good other people think you are. It is, without a shadow of a doubt, subjective, because everybody has their own mind maps, which is a perception of the world that they decode around them as external reality. Everybody has a different mind map. So even two people standing in the same park looking at the same tree will have a different perception of what they can see around them. There might be some real basic things like that, you know, if a third person was there and they said, can you both see that tree? They'd say, yeah, but they would see different things in that tree, and their overall perception, their periphery of everything else going on around them, and while they're focusing on that one thing, is completely different. So there's never going to be a magical formula. Like when people say, I want to be the best artist in the world, or I want to be the best singer in the world in terms of creativity or whatever, it's like, well, can you really be the best of anything? Because ultimately somebody's going to come along and have a different view of what you've done. Not everybody's going to like what you do. Some people are going to love it. Some people are going to absolutely hate it. So it's kind of, again, it's the overcoming the fear. When you're going on any sort of journey of expansion of anything, or you're entering into some new realm of exploring something, at some point you do have to sort of get over the fear element of what people think of you. You know, it's like the whole thing of talking about alternative things as opposed to the mainstream. A lot of people, you know, particularly pioneers of this kind of stuff, have taken a lot of, you know, flack and abuse, and also it going, you know, back hundreds of years in the past. You know, people were burnt for sort of speaking outside of the normal paradigm of what was considered to be normal, and you know, all thrown into mental institutions and all the rest of it. But just generally in life, it doesn't even have to be anything majorly radical or off the wall. It can just be generally people struggle to say what they really think and feel. And to some extent, there is an element of, you know, social etiquette in terms of just blurting out and saying what you think and feel, because you can have an opinion about something, or you could disagree with someone. You don't have to be offensive in disagreeing with somebody else, if that makes sense. So there is some merit in, obviously there's a social etiquette of not being too harsh with your opinions, or preaching too much to people. But ultimately, I think people need to kind of get over this whole fear thing. And that's partly what we've sort of been trying to do with the Infinite Imaginaire, is we wanted to create a collaborative platform where people could come together with their ideas and participate, perhaps on a larger scale or a smaller scale, but ultimately they can feel safe in an environment where they know they're not going to get you know, abused for. And that's the same with Minds. Minds is a great place for, it's very accepting of people's views and opinions, and that's the beauty of it. And I think if we want to move forward in the difficult times we have coming, and also in existence, the things that we face at the moment, then we have to sort of very quickly come together and kind of get over these paranoias about what people think of us.
I completely concur, and I think there's two elements. There's two strands I really want to go down with you. One, where you just finished off, I think completely, because I think one of the things that we're going to have to face as just us as people is to understand that, and it's a dichotomy in some ways, because we need safe areas. We need areas where people can express themselves and they can feel they're comfortable to it. But even in those zones, I don't want any place where everyone's just basically like becomes an emperor's new clothes. I don't want any area, which is, I know, I'm sure you 100% agree with me and concur with me. We don't want areas where the artist just goes and everyone says, "Oh, you're great, you're great, you're great, you're great." Because I don't want. Personally, that's my reflection as an artist. I stepped away from the amount of art collectives because it was either just one element or the other. It was either just crabs in a bucket all pulling each other down, or everyone just sitting there kissing everyone's ass. And it was like, I'm not learning anything from this, and I don't need that. I need that creative element of being told, look, why are you looking at it from this? Like I say, we're all studying at a tree. Let's have a look at it and not just go, oh, that's the only perception of a tree. So I think that's one element. But equally, the dichotomy with that is, I do think as we move forward, and like you said about the times we live in, I think that we need the element that really needs to be opened up is the for want of a better word, the mindset of people to understand they can sit down, put an idea, put into a chair of reason and discuss these ideas. I think this is what's lost in our culture. Everyone's just screaming. It's what we talk about Facebook. Everyone just gets in an echo chamber and screams at each other, and nothing's ever sort of spoken about. And it's just like kids in a playground. So I think that's one element. And tapping into what your first thing you were saying, and I think this is something I think is crucial as well, is that one of the shifts that people have got to get, and you spoke about creativity, instead of people, like you said, having the mindset was already being programmed to arguably about how you're concerned about what other people think about it, and therefore you're fearful about what people judge and all the rest of it. I think more it's completely the opposite side of that. If we all realize as individuals that what we're just doing then is, I mean, to me, creativity and anything is you pluck something from the mind and you've put that intent onto music, onto something else, then it takes a life form of its own. Now that in itself, in a universe that's multi-expanding, that you could argue there's multi-universes, and the idea that we can just, in our minds, just pluck something out and put it into a physical form or into an audio form or whatever form it may be, instead of being, like I say, being programmed, concerned about what other people think about it, if we just understood about how, for want of a better word, magical is that? How a dolphin can't do this. I mean, I'm not one of these people that looks at life. I mean, like, yeah, hey, there's intelligence everywhere, but I've never seen an ant make a mobile phone or make a computer yet. And this is what I'm saying. If we just unleashed ourselves and understood that, instead of worried about what everyone else did, and we just tapped into ourselves and went, wow, this is a really powerful element we've all got inside, so we can create. And then with that creation, because this is one of the things you find with creation, once you do that and you understand that you're tapping into yourself more, all the things that the dissonance of the world aren't around the creative. That's what I've always said. Wars and people killing people on battlefields isn't done by the artists. They may be used as propaganda tools, but it's not artists who go out to war. It's not the creatives who go out to war. It's the people who don't want that. And that this is where we can shift. And this is why I love history. And I don't know what your thoughts on this, but when I look back at things, I think maybe as much as we look at the times now and they're going through, like I think you were speaking about, maybe some deep dark times is where we are, especially in this part of the world. But equally, I say a lot of times, I think we're on the greatest of days because we've got the ability. I argue we're living in a renaissance right now, and it's just how many people, as I was saying before, are going to wake up and realize this, and then take control of it, and then realize, like, wow, we've only got a short space, and we've got the ability to not only create and tap into these things, but we've got the ability to spread this like never before. And I go right back because it's one of the things you spoke about, and I'm fascinated in this, particularly speaking to an artist. If I had spoken to the Meg Boardman, when she's 6, 7, running around in the playground, and you said you wasn't a great art waking, I went through the same thing. People have this idea that people, artists have this, like you say, this conversion moment. I, in essence, am the same person I was in how I view art and all the rest of it, and how I feel about creativity as I was when I was a kid. All I've ever found is, like, the older I've got, I thought, why do we all complicate this as adults? We had this sus as kids. We all ran around the playground. We all had our own little rules, and it was just, I don't think much has changed in my own mentality since a kid. I just think there's, you know, you kind of see society and how it morphs around you. And you spoke upon this earlier on. So is that something, again, that you find in yourself, that because you did mention you didn't have a conversion moment. Do you feel that it's just you've had that same drive ever since you were maybe, you know, 6, 7, 8, you know, as a young child?
Yeah, I've always been the same. I've always been, in that respect, never really grown up out of having this sort of, to some extent, I've had periods of my life where I've been very unconfident and, you know, seeing the world in a very negative light. But I've always had that sort of, to some extent, unwavering belief, you know, and some of my family members and friends would sort of say to me, yeah, you need to sort of ground yourself a little bit. You know, you can't do this or you can't do that. And I said, yeah, but why not? You know, why can't we do this? And I think at the moment, saying what you're saying about living through a renaissance, which I totally agree with, we have all these amazing digital tools at our fingertips, whereby it's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword, because I was chatting to somebody the other day, and it's, in one way, we can connect with people like that, you know, all over the world and collaborate on these projects, which is amazing. But, and you know, have these ideas and innovate together and all the rest of it. But also, technology can be divisive in the sense that we are just kind of placing ourselves in these virtual reality environments where we don't actually meet up and, you know, in the flesh, as it were, and we just do everything from our computers, which ultimately, as a long-term thing, can be very divisive and very negative for, you know, the collective consciousness moving on, progressing. But I think at the moment it is a necessary thing that we have to embrace and use it in the right way, because I think what will happen, rather than going out on all these protests, fighting the things that we want to eradicate, which actually just fuels them more, because we're actually put on a vibrational level. We're actually, in terms of quantum physics, we're pouring more energy into the things that we don't want. We're actually giving them life by doing that, by fighting it. The only way, because people say, well, what are we supposed to do then? How are we supposed to change it? The only way we can change anything is by creating something new. So when we collaborate and we come together and we create the new, it makes the old paradigm obsolete. It then becomes non-existent. And the thing is, people are constantly shifting realities or shifting parallel realities through their imagination. So when people go through a thought process, or even recalling something that happened previously, they might be recalling their day. At the end of the day, they're lying in bed, they're recalling what happened. At that moment, when they are recalling in their mind, or documenting in some form of linear order what's happened in that day, at that point, they're actually shifting reality. They're moving into a new reality. So quite often people will be sort of looking at this on a much more complicated, deeper level, that it is unnecessary in a sense, because they're thinking, oh, are we going to suddenly shift into this new paradigm, and then we're going to suddenly wake up and be in this new world? The reality is we're actually doing that constantly. It's a constant process, the whole thing with parallel realities. We're shifting parallel realities all the time. So, you know, in terms of linear time, you have what we call the past, present, and future. And all our recall of past is literally a record, a recorded, documented evidence of previous now moments, if that makes sense. And the future is what we're dreaming up in the, you know, as a constant thing, as an ongoing thing. The future is basically potential now moments, potential present moments, but the reality is we're always in the present moment. So consciously we can come together and we can use these digital tools, as I call them, to collaborate and create new things, and then that ultimately makes the old fall away. The old doesn't exist anymore. So when people look at their past and they're hung up on things that have happened in their past, which is affecting their current state of mind, their current state of consciousness, and what they're creating as they think about things in their imagination. You can say to those people, well, the past technically doesn't exist. It only exists as a record within your DNA, a recorded record of things that have gone before, things that you've thought up before. So you can now safely say to yourself, that past, that thing that is holding me back, that, or that I'm torturing myself with, and I'm giving myself post-traumatic stress disorder with, doesn't exist anymore. Only in your record. So what I'm saying is we can reprogram our minds to cultivate the things in our subconscious that will then inevitably play out in our conscious world, or what we decode as reality. So there's a way of you know, anything that is, whatever's cultivated in the subconscious brain, it's kind of like a garden of creation. Whatever is programmed within your, whatever programs you're running in your subconscious will play out in your conscious life. So in terms of the law of attraction and manifestation and all these sorts of things, like The Secret, you know, and all these, you know, manifesting our desires and all the rest of it, it's about cultivating the right things in our subconscious, and then we then see those things become reality in our everyday lives. So
no, carry on, sorry.
Yeah, so I would say that is something people can work on if they're having issues with moving on from a mindset. You know, it could be something that, you know, people can be saying, oh, I really want to do such and such, but for some reason, and I've done all these things that are congruent to what I want to do, but it's not coming into fruition. I'm struggling. I keep coming up, having all these obstacles. Sometimes it can be something that they're not consciously aware of. It can be a program that they keep running in their subconscious mind, which is affecting what happens in their conscious life. So their conscious brain is telling them that they want to do something. So they're saying, well, hang on a minute, I want this and I don't want that. And I'm very clear about the fact I don't want that. So why do I keep getting the thing that I don't want? Because it's a program in their subconscious that they're running. And that could be something from their childhood. I mean, there's like, from the ages of 2 to 7, that's often referred to as formative years, because that's a period of a person's life that is where they're very moldable, where whatever happens to them, the people that they see as major role models, so it could be parental role models, or it could be teachers, or just general life experiences and the things that happen to them in that time. They're very, I mean, I could go into more detail about this on another show, but you've got the chakra system, and chakra systems are developing in a young person's life, and different chakras develop at different ages, which is why between the ages of 2 to 7, there's a very, that period of time in a person's life is very crucial to how a person becomes as an adult, or how they're shaped. That's not to say that, you know, it's not set in stone. You know, you can change things and you can work on things, but that's a very precious period of time in a person's life. The ages of 2 years to 7 years. So, you know, I think that these are all things that people, you know, if people, it's all about having knowledge and being able to educate yourself about these things. And that's the beauty of the era that we're living through now, is because we've got all of this at our fingertips. And obviously we have to be discerning about what we read and information that we share on the internet, because not all of it's accurate or correct. And I think as we become more connected with each other, and this is the only way, because that's another thing people will say, was how do you know what's the truth? How do you know if it's true or not? How do you know whether something's worth putting all your energy into investigating further? And the only way you can really uncover what the truth is, if there is such a thing, because again, you could argue that that's a subjective thing, then it's the only way you can do that is by talking to people, by researching things, by even looking at things that you wouldn't normally be interested in. So somebody might share something with you and you think, oh, that's not really something that I'm not that interested in. It's not really you're not really turning onto it. You're thinking, oh, I don't really want to read that. But sometimes those are the things that if you actually spend the time and the effort reading, that give you that other crucial piece of the puzzle that you've been looking for, that has been, you've been looking at things, but there's bits missing and you can't quite see the bigger picture yet because you haven't got these certain aspects of the puzzle. So I would always say, when something comes along in your, appears in your reality and you think, oh, can't really be bothered with that. But if it keeps appearing, you see something, you disregard it or you dismiss it. And then it comes again, and then it comes a third time, and you think, this thing keeps being shown to me, but I'm not looking at it. I would say that you would definitely need to pay attention to whatever that thing is, because that could be the crucial part of the puzzle. And that really is the only way to get any kind of clearer understanding of what is happening, what's going on, and the truth is by educating yourself. And obviously a lot of people don't want to do that because they'll say, well, I haven't really got time to do that because I've got a young family and I've got to go to work, and it's not that I'm not interested in these other things, but I haven't got the time to research information. And but unfortunately there does have to be an element of work in it. If you want things to change, you do have to put the work in, you do have to look at things, research things, but again, we've been indoctrinated and programmed to believe that all the answers are going to be given to us,
mm-hmm.
and that we have leaders that will tell us what we have to do. This is what you have to do. This is the time you have to do it. You get up in the morning at 9 o'clock, you go to work from 9 till 5, and then you have 2 days off in the week, and that's how it's going to be. And you're completely free to do whatever you want, but we want you to come back again in the morning at 9 o'clock and do what we say. So, and people will complain about that and say, oh, this life's shit, I don't want to do this. But then they say they haven't got the time to put the work in to change things, or they can't, they're in a vicious cycle, etc. But I always think there's always something you can do, even the smallest thing that you do that is outside of your normal routine, or even it could be something that's not out of your comfort zone. That's another thing. I think people do have to at some point step out of their comfort zone a little bit and do things that they wouldn't normally want to do. And it's like when you're a kid and you're really scared to do something. I remember when I was a kid, we used to went to this big farm place once, and they had these things called, I think they still have them around, they're called death slides. And basically when you go at the top, it looks like a complete sheer drop, but you just sort of come off the edge and it's just like a slide. And I remember going up to this one with my dad, and he's like, it's all right, you'll be fine. I think I was like 7 or something at the time. You'll be okay. And I was terrified. But once I'd gone down this slide, they had to drag me away from this farm because I just wanted to keep going back on this slide because it was brilliant. Once I'd sort of overcome my initial fear, it was the best thing since sliced bread. So I just kept wanting to go on the slide. And I think that's what people have to think, is if they can just overcome that initial bit of fear and just do something. It can be the smallest thing. It doesn't have to be anything major to start with, because when you do something small, you can kind of build up, and then you get your confidence and you do more things. So
yeah, completely. And again, I mean, one of the things I think, just to sort of to pick up what you just said then, I think one of the duality to that is sometimes it's not about what you do. Sometimes I think a lot of this is about learning what you drop, what you don't do. I mean, as much as, like you were saying before, about the people say, oh, but it's so hard work. What I was trying to allude to earlier on about, they look at people, oh, it's so hard work to be an artist. You're going to become poor, or whatever you're going to do, you're going to become an outsider and all this sort of stuff. But it goes back to what we just, I think you're quite rightly speaking about. I think half the thing that you can do in your life is just drop certain things, because it's like one of the things I found with many creative people I've spoken to, from all forms of creativity, from coders to artists to musicians, but there's some, you start to pick up on certain themes that they all have in common, or certain disciplines they all have. And one of the it's not so much a discipline, it's what they don't do. None of these people I know watch TV. They ditched that a long time ago. And they will understand what you're just saying about how their time is precious and think, well, I could sit down tonight and just, oh, I don't want to think I've had a hard day at work. But they will not. They will spend that time in, like you said, learning something. And this is one of the things that I think I was trying to sort of, I think we're kind of theme what we're talking about tonight, because I think once people understand, and I don't think this is really, unless you do take that step, like you say, in doing things into jolting your psyche, for a better word, jolting your neuralistic system, is once you go into that, you realize about how incredible this mind we have inside of us all got. And one of the things I give to people when they say, oh yeah, but I don't want to go outside my comfort zone, exactly what you're just speaking about, whatever it may be. And that comfort zone can even be some people just to get off their backsides and go out for a walk in the rain. They're like, oh no, I'll get a car down to the shop or whatever. Some people, it's just that simple. But once and these people always give you an excuse and giving you an excuse. And like you say, the first thing they come to you go, oh, it's too hard. And you think, well, if I said to you 10 years ago, look, and handed them a mobile phone, and they would have gone, oh yeah, but that's going to be so hard to understand. I'm going to have to go through so much. Look, but we don't. Our minds, it's instantly got it. No one gave us any lessons to use the technology we've got right now. We just stepped out a little bit, and then our minds went, yeah, okay, we can deal with this. And this is what I'm trying to say. Everybody's got inside them the ability to learn and do anything. This is the whole point. You can literally be. And again, I wrote a piece a long time ago when I lived in Venezuela. And it was a process I went through, and I had a process where every day for a year, by discipline, I would write something, and I had no structure to it. It was literally one stream of unconscious every year. And so, I went through. Even the year I did it, I broke my wrist, so I couldn't. I had to write left-handed. So there was days when I was just writing, one or two words. There was other days when I was writing the whole thing. Anyway, the whole point I'm trying to make was the theme that kept coming through this piece of writing was about the idea about how we're gods amongst men. How this idea that we don't even realize the potential that we've actually got as human beings on this planet is, and that's all about us stepping out the fear. And this is one of the things I think. Again, it goes back to, like you said before, you mentioned quite, the 2 to 7 bit. Well, that's an age-old saying, isn't it? Give me the boy from 0 to 3 and I will give you the man. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think this is one of the things that we've all, like you say, people can make the choice of. And this goes back to what we're discussing. As much as people they know things. For instance, like with the child, they may have a child and go, oh, well, I'll hand that over to someone else. And then that's what I'm saying. You've got a child that's 0 to 3. And how many people will go, oh, well, we'll both go out to work so we can pay someone to look after our child. And they're giving this precious element to another person. And you go to them and say, this is complete nonsense, what you're doing. And they would, it goes to what you were just saying, they will justify it and they will give you every reason for it. And then there will be exactly the same people who will complain about everything, will be the most negative people. And you just come out of the conversation with these people and think, oh, my whole being just feels drained of energy just from these people, because you come out of it and you think, hey, like you said, you can't all your life stand at the top of the hill and go, oh, and rationalize your mind about how to get down the bottom of the hill, like on that death slide. Because the more you're up there, standing there, rationalizing it, you will never get to it. And that's a perfect example of fear. And this is what people are like with their lives, because everything around us is constructed by us. It's all about us, how much we bend to the illusion. And you talk about this with people and they go, oh yeah, man, I get that. But then they go out and do their like you say, they're switching to their everyday normality. And then they say, well, it's just too hard. And I think that the element is, it's what you don't do. If you've got, that's why I think the one reflection I can give, and the age I've got to in my life, and I think it's to start to look at it like everything. If you've got anything in your surroundings that you can look around right now and you think, have I used it for a year? Have I worn that set of clothes? Have I spoken to that person? It goes back to what you're saying about Facebook. Why have I got people on my social media that I haven't spoken to since I was 16? And if you start doing this in your life and you cut and you cut and you cut, you suddenly find out how much you just progress as a human being. And then I think you're quite eruditely spoke upon, you just naturally are led to try other things, completely out of the norm. And that's the point. And this is where again, it all goes back to how we've been boxed. You've been boxed as like it is with me. I don't even like using the word. I mean, even tonight when I was giving the description for this conversation, I thought, what do I use? And I use visionary artist. And I don't even like the word artist because it boxes him in. Because I think that people like me and you, we just sit there all day, like, you know, like whatever the cliche they got in their heads, and we're sitting there, you know,
having visions,
exactly,
dreaming up these unrealistic worlds in our heads, dreaming about this, dreaming about that, and it's like,
exactly,
yeah, immediately conjures up an image of somebody, or they obviously smoke pot, or they're on another, they live in a dream world. There's that classic thing, you know, getting your head out of the clouds. There's a reason for that, because, you know, the few people that kind of run everything, and I don't see it as them as the enemy in a way, because I believe that we're all one consciousness separated off into different aspects of the one consciousness. So you have kind of everything is about polarity in the third dimension. So you have everything's, you know, you have night and you have the daytime. So you have the dark and the light, if you know. But the point is, we're all contributory creators of any kind of perpetual cycle that on the negative that we don't want. So I don't kind of blame any particular group or people, but, you know, for ease of understanding, you know, the ones that are kind of the elite people that want everything to be done in a certain way, there's that whole programming of the institutions of, like, you know, they reward a lot of the left-hand brain activity. So a lot of the stuff taught in schools is to enhance the left linear thinking part of the brain rather than reward the creative side of the brain. So there's that aspect as well, that obviously people are so heavily indoctrinated to not think outside of the box, and so they end up continuing down that path, which is you know, ultimately detrimental. But yeah, I think that's another thing, is the whole label thing is a terribly divisive culture, because it's that whole thing, like you were saying, going right back to when we're born and we have a birth certificate. It kind of starts there, you know, with the identity thing. And a lot of people, you know, you hear a lot of people say, which I find really ironic, they say, oh, you know, I just want to come home from work, I don't want to think about all this deep stuff, I just want to come home from work, put my feet up, have a glass of wine, and I want to switch off. And the irony is, to switch off, they put the TV on, or the television on. They switch on to switch off. And the TV actually puts the brain into an alpha state, which is a very suggestible, moldable brain state, where you literally just absorb information like a sponge. So you just literally sit there and you can just be watching garbage, and it's all going into your subconscious. And then that then influences and affects your life, your reality. You know, unbeknownst to a lot of people, they're creating their own reality. But they believe that they are, you know, victim of circumstance, and that everything that they see as their external reality is because of other people or the things that are happening to them, rather than them creating it. You know, obviously that's the thing. And a lot of people don't want to lie in bed and think about who they are, as opposed to, I'm Joe Bloggs, I work in a bank, and I'm a Christian, or I'm a Muslim, or whatever, I've got this religion, and I'm middle class, you know, or I'm lower middle class, whatever their labels are that identify who they are. And quite often people, if they have a massive life change sort of overnight, you know, they might lose their job, and then the following week they might lose their partner in an accident, or some sort of tragedy happens. And people quite often have what they call a breakdown. You know, they have a breakdown in their programming, which is viewed as a bad thing, and then they're medicated with antidepressants or something, and then they call it depression. Well, I think that depression is actually a good thing, because depression is actually the person becoming very introspective, going going inside and actually looking at themselves, which is quite uncomfortable for a lot of people. If people don't do it naturally, because some people wake up one day and say, I'm going to go on a spiritual journey. So they decide to do it, which is kind of the same as depression. You know, any journey of enlightenment or awakening is very uncomfortable at the beginning. It's not, you know, all lovely and great as a lot of the memes that we see floating around the internet suggest it is. The beginning stages of enlightenment or waking up is not a comfortable process at all. But if people would just go with it and they didn't medicate with antidepressants and all the rest of it, they would come out stronger, because they would learn more about who they are, and then they could learn to become comfortable about who they are. You know, that's what awakening is. So, but of course, you know, the whole pharmaceutical thing and being medicated is that just halts the process. That just blocks people off from expanding further, which is, you know, largely what all these pharmaceuticals are about. Like, you know, children that are seemingly being born and being already that way, you know, they're very different. They don't respond to the usual forms of indoctrination and institutional teaching and all the rest of it. So they get labelled with having ADHD or some other personality disorder that then has to be medicated to control the expansion of their mind. So that's the problem with the society we live in, and people just don't want to look at themselves because it's just too frightening. So I think a lot of everything, you know, they want, on one level they want things to be different, and they go on these sort of regular Facebook holidays because it's all getting on top of them, and on some occasions you offer them a solution or an alternative, and then they all of a sudden the dissonance sets in, and they don't want to look at it because they know on one level that means looking at the self, which means acknowledging, you know, me and Satori were talking about it the other day, and it's the dark night of the soul. And I know that you'll relate to this, Tim, because being an artist, you often have to visit the dark night of the soul to create things. You know, you often go into those realms when you're creating. So sometimes I go into a bit of a bubble when I'm doing art, and I don't speak to a lot of people. I can become a bit of a loner when I'm doing my art. And sometimes it's a really enjoyable experience, but other times I get these periods when I'm working on a piece of art and it sounds quite obvious in a way. Well, people will say, well, that's obvious. I'm getting really frustrated and irritable with a particular piece of art, and I'm getting to the point where I just want to trash it. And then quite often those are the pieces of work that turn out to be the best if I actually somehow manage to push through the pain barrier with it. Quite often, you'll relate to this. So quite often those are the times when you want to be actually pushing through. When it all becomes a bit too much and you want to give up is the time when you actually don't want to give up. But of course that is easier said than done, you know, to not give up when it becomes really hard. And I find that with doing certain pieces of artwork, I'm getting really stressed and it's really affecting my mental status. And other times it's a really enjoyable flowing, going with the flow process, and other times it's not. So yeah, I think any sort of going into those realms of expansion or creativity will show you parts of yourself that perhaps you don't like or you don't want to look at.
I totally completely get where you're coming from. I mean, I think one of the elements, I think, I as an artist completely, when I'm creating, I'll have to say this, I don't like anyone. I mean, I don't like distractions at all. Now, when I say, you know, completely, that's not the case, because sometimes I like to go out and do public art, as in I like to go out and paint in public, and I know that people are going to surround me, because people are fascinated by the process of human being painting. I mean, has not gone away. I found that absolutely. I lived in Leeds. I did the same in Leeds. I'm up in
I was
Scotland.
born in Leeds, actually. I was born in Wakefield.
Well, there you go. Small world.
Another synchronicity there for you. Just sort of throw that one in.
But the point I'm being, you're absolutely right. Well, you do go into those zones. But I think one of the things that you do find this, and I think this is one of the things I was just trying to allude to about, we're all boxed. So people, you know, like one of the phrases I dislike most. I mean, talk about the power of language. One of the ones I think I don't, mate. I find it really the worst thing anyone can say to me. Go, so what do you do then? You know, automatically you got to give a job and your title, and you know, and I'm like, you know, and then you have to think, well, that's why I just say I'm a creative. And they go, what do you mean you're creative? What, are you an artist, a musician? I go, well, yeah, I'm all those things you're going to name now. And this is the thing, because we're already automatically boxed into corners, and that's why I don't like to. Like I said before, tonight even putting up visionary artists. I know you're not an artist. This is the whole thing. It's not even we're creative people. I think the element of creativity isn't something that's unique to certain people. I think it's there for all humanity. It's just all the illusion around us that stops us all being creative. Because the amount of people that I talk to and go, oh, I'd love to be creative like you. And I go, well, hey, but you spend 6 hours a day fiddling with your motorbike and, you know your gear sprockets. What do you think that is? I haven't got a clue. You're using your mind in a creative way. But the element that's true is when you're in this process, and like you say, when you go, I like to go down dark paths, because I think it's one of the roles, I think, of being a creative person, particularly as an artist. I think that's the role we have. We're there to prick the bubble of people around us and say, hey, you know, let's just be true about this. We've got this creeping mortality about us all. We're not all enlightened beings that are going to live forever as, 1,000 years. You know, mortality's around us. And I think that's the element of why creative people have always gone to the dark points, because especially we like to pop the frequency of the society around us. But when you are in that zone, it's the same thing when you're in any of these zones. When I'm playing music, whenever I'm in a creative zone, time disappears completely, and you absolutely hit the nail right on the head, because you just tune into yourself, and you're like, oh my, where did 6 hours go? And that is the beauty of being creative. That's what people say to me. Oh, why they look at you and that, wow, I'd love to live your life. No, what you can do. It's exactly that. It's giving up things. It's the dropping of certain things, the dropping of, and then the other hand of it, in saying to people, hey, it's not easy. It's a difficult process because it's a discipline. But that process of discipline, and this is the duality of both what I want to say to you. I mean, this is why I'm always kind of have to check myself. Whenever I'm having these conversations, I go back to what I was saying earlier on. I know people personally who right now will be getting up and think, oh, here we go, I've got to go and do the water run and walk 4 miles and 4 miles back. So whatever I'm thinking about, how fearful, whatever I'm in my life, on this same rock that we're spinning on, there's people who would listen to what anyone can, oh, do I switch off TV and do I sit and, learn a new skill? And, oh, it's going to, when they actually hear that, it sounds so dissonant to their lives. But do you know what I mean? So I think that's one of the elements of it. But again, it all relates back to what we're talking about. And I think it's the whole theme of what it is. It's that breaking through, and the only way that anyone can ever break through, and that's why I think it's fascinating you spoke about it when you were a child, or like when I was asking you earlier on, because when we're kids, we all saw that. We all looked at it, like you were saying about when you were still on that desk slide, or when I was in the playground or whatever. You think, as a kid, you understood this all. Well, I don't have to be at school, and I can't wait to the day when I'm 16 and I don't have to be at school. And then we get to 16, and you were speaking upon this. We still we just treat life as school. And one of the things it was like, where have we strayed from when we were 6? When we were 6 and 7, we'd got it all then. This is what I'm saying. We almost had a purity between us as child. I'm getting more and more like this, thinking that the 7, 8-year-old kids, they had it more pure. They organised themselves in playgrounds. There was no fights. Things were resolved amongst themselves, issues. People and I don't know. When I was 8, I specifically, as much as we can, as much as we can remember anything, but life, I wasn't any different. I wasn't something like you said. I didn't have a conversion moment at 6, when I was 22.
Yeah.
Went, oh, no, it's always been the same. It's just these illusions that we built up upon. This is the thing we're talking about. It's how much along those of that line do you want to go down? How much of, and this is what it breaks down, because basically we're lazy and we've been taught to be lazy. So hey, if someone else can do that, and if it means me giving up that to do this, and this is why people aren't creative. They're like, oh, someone else will be creative. Someone else will create the films. Someone else will make the music. And then this is the world we live in. All the time everyone's thinking someone else is going to do it. No one's doing it. And then they go, where's all the music gone? Where's all the films gone? You think, well, I wonder where it's all gone.
And the thing is, people, that's the other culture that we live in, is that we expect other people to do it for us. That's what we've been indoctrinated to believe. So we're just sort of yes men and women, yes, we'll do that, no, we won't do that, or yes, we'll do that, but we don't want to do that, which is largely part of our society. But that in itself, we have this whole work ethic of You know, you've got to go to work and you've got to, you know, pay taxes and all the rest of it. But actually, all of that is really lazy, because that just stops you from doing anything that I would consider to be real work. And if real work isn't necessarily work that you don't enjoy, you know, if you're doing something that you love, you could literally work 24/7 doing the thing that you enjoy, to the point that you actually have to tell yourself, I need to not do this because I'm going to physically burn myself out. That's the key difference to doing something that you love and feel passionate about, to doing, because what people will probably find, a lot of people will say, well, I just want to be able to have a lot of money in the bank, not have to work, go on 2 or 3 fantastic holidays a year with my family, and just have leisure time. But then we all know that, you know, with celebrity culture and people that have got a lot of money, quite often they turn to drugs and go completely off the rails. And I think they've actually got a term for it. I think they call it paradise syndrome. Basically means you've got everything. You have got everything. You've got so much money that you can literally have whatever you want. So you then create some kind of diversion, or you create some sort of hedonistic pastime, like mass drug taking, or completely going off the rails because of it, to give yourself some kind of adrenaline boost, because you've got everything. So the reality is, people are just sort of looking into the future, looking down the timeline, saying, oh, if I had this and I had that, I'd be happy. But the reality is they wouldn't be. They still wouldn't be fulfilled, because the only way you can be fulfilled as a person is if you follow your own individual path, or find out what it is that you feel passionate about. You know, and sadly, so many people go through their entire life, their entire existence, from cradle to grave, never ever knowing what it was that they were good at or what they were passionate about, because of the distractions, because of and the indoctrination of society. They just plod along on the treadmill, the proverbial life treadmill, and they don't, purely through fear, they don't ever want to look at the prospect of doing anything else, because of what people might think of them, or the fact, or a lot of people have a fear of failure as well. You know, if I do that, I could fail, and then I'm going to look stupid or whatever. So they go, and it is really sad. They go through their entire life to the point that they die basically, and they've never ever explored themselves or looked at themselves. And there's also that aspect of, like, you know, oh, that's vanity. Spending all that time on yourself, and, like, you know, God forbid, liking yourself. You know, that's completely vain. You don't want to like yourself or be confident in your abilities, because then everybody's going to think you know, you love yourself a bit too much. So there's that element as well.
Okay, Meg, well, it begs the question then, and I'll throw that over to you. I mean, the question is, and I've contemplated, and maybe it's a lot of the drive between it has been all my life. I mean, you've eruditely spoken upon this. You're given a situation, like you say, where people will just go through, plod through life, as you just said, quite eruditely, get to the end. Right, okay, my question's always been, what is the confidence of these people? Do these people think they're going to get to the end? They're going to come back again, and they're going to come back again, and they're going to come back again? Because I don't understand it. If they don't, I can't. To me, it's one of the things I've spent my life trying to contemplate. It's like, what is the assurance that these people have got that they can just go through life and think, well, either they think two things: they're going to live forever, and then someone happens and, you know, around them dies, and then they change their mind about things, or they just, like you said, just plod through life, get to their 60s and die. And you think, well, what's been their driven point? Because everybody, when it gets down to it, I don't know, maybe this is the thing, but everyone, I think, and if I'm like it, I think most people must be like it, must get to the pill at the end of the day and think, what's this all about? And but those people must think, I don't know. That's a question I'll throw to you. What do you think those people are thinking? What do you think the majority of people, as you just quite described, who will just plod through, what's their drive? I mean, do you think that they think, what, they're going to come back again, and it's just a cycle, and they're going to come back and play the game again and again and again, and then gradually get through it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it varies from person to person. I think some people just have this very strong work ethic, where they believe that, no, this is what you've got to do. This is the way it's always been done. This is what my parents did. This is what I'm going to do. It might not be that pleasant at times, but it's got to be done. You know, those types of people, you've got to do it. You know, you just got to get your head down and do it. And if they get into contact with anybody who's trying to thinks outside of the box, They'll be like, no, 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 you can't do that. You've just got to get your head out of the clouds and you've got to get on with it. Other people get on with it, you know, the whole work thing and plodding along on the treadmill. But they do have secret fantasies and thoughts, and they do have aspirations beyond what they're doing. So there is some glimmer of hope for those people, that they're thinking, you know, maybe one day I will find the confidence, or I'll get the break, you know, that the proverbial break, or, you know, some magical person will suddenly appear before me at some point, key point in my life, and that everything will change. Or, you know, you get like the classic people, or women or men, who, not necessarily married couples particularly, or, you know, the married couple, children, family setup, but people who have these sort of serial relationships and it never works out. You know, their whole focus is on relationships. So it's like they have these relationships with people and then they don't work out, and then they do a bit of self-improvement or therapy or whatever, and then it's like the way they speak is like they're waiting for this magical person to appear, their soulmate. You know, the soulmate's going to appear. The minute the soulmate appears, everything's going to be perfect. It's all going to be great, and their life's just going to fall into place. So, and you get the other people who think they're going to get a career break, or they're on some kind of path and they're doing things that they hate at the moment, you get the people that are just kind of like, right, I'm just going to put up with it because that's the way it is, that's the way it's always been. Then you get the people who, depending on where their main focus is, whether it's a relationship or some kind of career break or change of life, major life change that's going to suddenly make their lives amazing, they're sort of holding on to that hope, and that's what keeps them going. But the key thing is, with the two people that have this glimmer of hope, the issue with that is that they're waiting for an external person or somebody to come along and change it. But obviously that's never going to happen. It's going to sound really cliche, the whole change comes from within. But when the change comes from within, you know, everything that happens to you is basically a mirror, sort of an evidential mirror, if you like, of your change that's happened from within. Because obviously everything is a mirror. So, you know, we bring things into our reality on a vibrational level. It's like a radio station. You have different wavelength frequencies, and two different frequencies can't exist within the same field of energy or within the same wavelength. They would clash. So whatever you are vibrationally emanating, you know, whatever vibration you're on, you will bring an equal, an exact match of vibration into your reality, which is, you know, quantum physics. You'll bring that into your reality as like a mirror. It's like a mirror, really. So that's the kind of the true meaning, as I've come to understand it, of change from within. So when you change from within, you bring the things that are reflective of that change, of whatever vibration you're on, into your reality. And that's when, you know, some of these amazing synchronicities can happen in life, because quite often people will have a very bog standard life, if you like, whatever that is, and they will suddenly have, you know, the classic epiphany, or you know, they suddenly start to have a little bit of an awakening process, and they vibrationally, they get themselves on the path of the things that they actually have been desiring, or the things that they want to achieve in their life. And then as a result of that, they suddenly start seeing all these amazing synchronicities happening, which I think Carl Jung referred to them as meaningful coincidences. He termed them, but they're actually synchronicity. So it's that whole thing when you see you know, you hear a song, and then you see somebody in the high street, a friend, and they start talking about the song or something really relevant to the song, and then you see a billboard or something, and so now quite often what happens with people when they first start that awakening process, when they first see the synchronicities to that degree for the first time in their life, whereas before that they were very going along in quite an unconscious state, a state of non-awareness, they freak out and they think, I'm going mad. I'm actually going mad. This is just weird. It's like a dream. And then what happens is the feeling of like fear of, oh my God, I'm going mad, there's something not right, throws them straight back down the vibrational ladder, back to the non-awareness state where and then they don't see the synchronicity anymore, and then they kind of take themselves off the path. When perhaps had they understood what that process was a bit more, they would have gone with it a bit more, and then they could have started achieving and actually seeing those things that they want in their life come into fruition. So I think synchronicity, when people see it for the first time, quite often some people are just thinking it's amazing, oh my God, this is really exciting, and they go with it. Other people fear it and they think, oh God, this is really weird and it's freaking me out a bit. And the minute they say that to themselves, they put themselves back down the vibrational scale and out of alignment with whatever it is they were wanting to achieve. Because obviously synchronicity is evidence of being in alignment with the things that you want to bring into your reality.
Exactly, and to sort of like bring it back to an earlier point you were making in regards to sort of, you know, the actual physical form of paintings, you know, with two artists. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, because it's one of the things that when you are actually painting, you start with a blank canvas, whatever color it may be, but you're building up and bit by bit, and you're seeing those contrasts and like I said, like we were saying before, you're building something up. But I wanted to allude this point, I know, before I forget about it, before we run away too much. But you mentioned about how, you know, sometimes about, you know, just stepping away at times, and that's a hard discipline of art. I mean, I have a great story. I want to allude to this, is that I think the greatest painting I've ever done, to my point in my life so far, was I did it when I lived in Argentina, and I took a day and I completely had this vision. It just came to me, and I started painting away and painting away, and I got completely caught up in the moment you just mentioned before, where you just get completely, just absolutely zoned in it, and I didn't stop, and now a couple of people will come and past the scene, like, oh my God, they were like, oh, you. Like, and I was like, I said, you know, they were like, wow, that's just unbelievable what you just done. I was like, I know this is incredible. Even for me, I just feel like I've just created an opus, but I didn't. I carried on and I carried on, and then literally, to cut a very long story short, 5 hours later, all that was left was a canvas of this brown splodgy paint, and this painting just lost forever. So there's a great lesson I learned in that process, was to sometimes just step away. And I think, you know, talking to an artist, I think one of the disciplines I learned from that moment was sometimes there's pieces of work that just come, and sometimes I will always just leave them and I'll go back the next day. Now, at times I've left pieces of artwork, left them away, you know, in a room, you know, literally just lock the door, come back next day, literally 24 hours later, something I was going to, like, you know, okay, I've got quite a lot to go down that process. When I come back the next morning, it's like, oh, no, I don't need to do anything more on that. But I think that's one of the great, you know, if we're going to sort of maybe give one sort of positive thing that people, maybe if they listen to this, can pull out of this conversation, is if you do go down any creative process, there's a great truth to be learned from stepping away. And I say, give it, for want of a better word, time. Give it a period of something. Give it from the sun to rise to the sun to set, and then come back to it, because it's a great discipline and a wisdom I've learned in my age. And I think it's something I try to implant with anybody when they're doing any creative process, whether it's a piece of music or anything. It's just sometimes, like you quite rightly said, it's when you're in that flow to walk away. And equally, the other time, it's a duality of that. At times when you're sitting there, I've learned this one. It's a duality to this. I've got to the point a long time ago in my life thinking, if I'm sitting there and I'm staring at canvas for more than, I don't know, half an hour or so, and I know I'm just literally just doing this for the sake of, oh, I'll walk away. I'll walk away and give it 24 hours and just do something completely different. Like you said earlier on, do something, you know, go and play anything, just something completely outside of it. And then you'll go back to it, and then it'll come back in, trusting yourself, like you said before. And I know it's particularly the culture we give in, particularly, you know, Great Britain, where it's all like, oh, deference to ourselves, and we don't big up ourselves. That's just ridiculous. That's what you were speaking of before. That's programming we've all been given on. It's always good to sort of, you know, feel your best. I mean, I think the challenge we've all got as human beings is to think, and this is where I want to really bring it back to real life, and I think everything else. I think it's kind of thing what we're talking about tonight. For any part where anyone wants to have a conversation about anything, all we've got as a reality is that we know right now we've got this conversation. Whether I'm going to be here in an hour's time, who knows? Whether, who I'm going to be here in a year's time, even who more knows. All I know is that, well, I've got this moment. I can look at it and think, okay, is this what I've done the best I can? And if I have to leave it for the rest of my life and I don't get to, I die at this moment, have I done the best I can to this moment? Shaping your reality and challenging yourself. This is one of the things I find with a lot of creative people. It's a discipline they can, a laziness they can fall into, where they don't challenge themselves. And it goes back to what we saying at the beginning. I think there's a great element about challenging yourself because of this mortality we know. We've only got a short period. Hey, what goes on after this? Hey, that's another conversation. We can have a whole life as people. We discuss, what nature reality is. But for us as human beings, and we have a certain period of time, and what we do with this, and this is one of the things that goes back to that whole I was trying to say before about why people live in this like you say, plodding along. But that at some point they're going to do it, and this is one of the things that amount of time I've seen people, and they will plod along, and then, like you say, their partner will die, or one of their close friends dies in the car accident, and they're like, and it shapes them completely, and then they look at it and think, what have I wasted so much time? Because we haven't got a finite time. Whether we do in the future, hey, that's another life as people. We can have a discussion whether in 100 years' time we are going to be able to live for 1,000 years, and all that brings. But that's another conversation. What I'm trying to say in this present moment we know right now, the drive we should all have is to be our best, and like you just said before, learn some disciplines, learn to do it, and understand that all of it is about challenging yourself. And as you said quite rightly before, it's like the element of life itself. None of it's easy. That's why I keep bringing it back to people, right now on this rock who are, doing hard toil. We've all got toil on this life, and we wouldn't have it anyway. I mean, it's the whole point. If this is just all one big ride, as Bill Hicks says, and we get to the end of it, I wouldn't choose my life any other way. And half the point, and it goes back to what you're saying about art, the art, when I'm creating art or anything, I love to go down. I love to take challenges. I love to be there. When you said about you were as a child looking at death, like, of course, that's what we do. We like to go and delve in those murky waters. I like to go swimming in, diving in murky waters and stuff. That's the element of what we did, because what I just said before, I'm thinking, if I've only got one shot, I'm not going to stick at that top of that hill and think, oh, what do I get to? The 12-year-old Megan, she's just been standing there for 6 years, like, oh, do I go down the left side? Do I go down this side? Of course you don't. You just do it. Ultimately, this is the big thing of it. What's the worst that's going to happen? The worst that's going to happen is you're going to die. Well, hey, we could die at any moment, and that's the drive, as I said before, to be creative. And once you're creative and you understand all this, it's what really sets. I don't know. It's to me, it's what I said before, and it's the same what I think we've been discussing tonight. It was what we had when we were kids. It's what we had when we were adults. It's that drive for life. And once you have to drive for life, none of this becomes, as you quite rightly said, a work or anything else. It becomes a passion. It becomes something that you're fulfilling in life, and you realize that you're living life to its fullest. And isn't that the want of what all we want as human beings? We all want everyone around us to be fulfilled to their full potential, surely.
Yeah, and I think if you spoke to anybody sort of on their deathbed and said, what their final words were in terms of what would have made them happy, what they want, most people just want loving relationships, harmonious relationships with friends, family, spouses, partners, whatever. And they want to be able to enjoy their lives. So it's not actually about having money, it's about what money can give people. There's this whole massive emphasis on having money that it's like the be all and end all. Like, oh, if I win the lottery, all my problems would be sorted out overnight and all the rest of it. It's like, well, it's not the money that people actually want, although they think that's what it is they want. It's what the money can bring them. And until people actually explore what it is that they're passionate about by becoming introspective, they won't actually know what amount of money they need to achieve that. This is the beauty of life and people, is that we don't all want the same thing. So there's never going to be an exhaustible supply of something, or but there's too many people doing that, I can't do that. That doesn't really exist, because every person wants something different. And the reality is, and the sad fact is, some people that wanted to have money or wanted all these great things, or they wanted to be rich or whatever, on their deathbed, what they actually wanted probably didn't require any money, any amount of money, or possibly a very small amount. It may have just required them to step out of their comfort zone and connect with other people to help make that happen. This is kind of the great thing that we have now, you know, with a lot of these collaborative projects rather, happening all over, and people connecting together to create things, create new platforms, things, and, you know, shared visions and goals, and bringing them into fruition. And the whole crowdfunding thing, you know, it's not like the old days where you've got to go to the bank and you've got to persuade the bank manager to give you £50,000 so you can start a business. You know, we've got so many things now at our fingertips where we can create things. And yeah, sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a shame that people don't sort of capitalise on that. But like you were saying about the art, I relate to that, because I've created some great things, some masterpieces, if you want to call them. I've even thought it's been really good.
Yeah.
And then I've just destroyed it. And then I'm like, now in the past, I've been like really gutted, but it's happened on other occasions after the first sort of couple of times it happened. And I'd be like, oh, well, I'll just stick a bit of white gas over it and I'll just start again. It doesn't matter. I'll just create something new, or I'll create something else out of the massive mud on the canvas. I'll just create something new out of that. So this is the thing. There is no failure. There is no failure. This is another thing that stops people, that cripples people from doing anything or progressing in life, because they fear failure and the embarrassment or the shame that might bring. But any entrepreneur, or any majorly successful entrepreneur, I'm just trying to think of an example. Richard Branson. If you spoke to Richard Branson, he'll probably tell you countless times that he failed before he became successful. Because, you know, you have to fail in order to get to the point that you need to get to, if that makes sense. Failure is just part of the process. Mm-hmm. It's just, unfortunately, we've got a term, we've got a word that carries a negative vibration, and the word's failure, but failure is nothing negative at all. Failure is just a teaching process, the ongoing of showing you a new direction. I always think if you are doing something repeatedly and it's not working, and then ultimately you then say you perceive that as a failure and give up, all the failure was showing you was that you were actually going against the flow of energy, you know, the creative flow of energy. You were basically swimming against the current of flow, the current energy. So it was being made very difficult. So you then perceive it as a failure, but all it was showing you was to move in a different direction. So if you see something or perceive something as a failure, all you have to say to yourself is, hang on a minute, this isn't a failure, this isn't a negative thing. I'm being shown to take a new direction, and then something new will come from that. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, I can't remember there's a famous phrase or famous saying, you keep getting the same things, right? If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you'll keep getting the same results. Mm-hmm. And that's all failure is. It's showing you, it's evidence to say, you're making this too difficult. You need to move in it. You need to try a different approach. You need to move in a different direction. That might be the point where you have to step out of your comfort zone, because the failure might actually be veiled, I'm not coming out of my comfort zone. So then you say, oh yeah, well, I've tried, I've done everything, I've stepped out of my comfort zone, but it's not working, so I'm going to give up. But actually, have you really stepped out of your comfort zone? Have you really tried something different? And the answer is probably no. You could probably do this, and then all of a sudden, as if by magic, all these new doors are going to open up to you that you never thought were possible, because you just did that one tiny little change of direction. That's all it took, a tiny thing to do something slightly different, move in a different direction. And then as a result of that, something amazing can happen as a result of it.
Yep, completely. And I think this is, you get into the dichotomy then. It's, I think we strayed into this area, which I think is another conversation completely. But you that you face that paradox of the individual, like you just spoke upon, the creative person who's the individual versus the crowd. Because as you just quite eruditely spoke upon, I mean, in any creative project, and this is the element of the discipline, I think creative people, the more and more you go, it's the same, dropping things, becoming water, my friend, as is quite famously once said. Once you start to become water, you can go, okay, I can go with the flow, and I'll go round the rock. I won't try to keep bashing it or trying to chop it down. But if you're embraced to the crowd, like many musicians, artists have to be, because you have to go, okay, I have to, to get funding, I have to go to the crowd, and or, you're an artist, and okay, I still, whatever the process is, but I'm now owning, my part of my is now owned by the crowd. The crowd might not go with that. They go, oh, wait a minute, and they don't understand that. So it's a shared mindset. The crowd need to understand, look, if you're going to support a creative person, you can't get angry when that creative person doesn't do what you think he should be doing in that moment, because unless you're in that moment, you don't understand. And this is the for want of a better word, the contract that we've all got to make with each other. We've all got to be going, okay, we've got to be a bit more flexible with each other, because this is, I think, what drives many creative people to become outsiders, because like you said before, they're fearful of everyone outside them saying, what are you doing? Why? And they're like, hey, I'm in the creative zone. But equally, it's if people, that's what I'm saying, we've all got to wake up to that. That's why to me, the element of creativity, as you said, quite what we said right at the beginning of this conversation, it's got to be, instead of drummed out of us in education and society, it's got to be something we've got to feed, because we've got to learn to for us all, not only the people who element doing the creative things, but the people who are wanting what they produce as at the end result, for them to go, okay, look, let them be creative. And this is what I find this really strange, because when I have lived in other parts of the world, like in South America, this was all understood completely. You only had a tribe of 150 people that I lived upon. They understood that I was the artist. They got that completely. So it was like, okay, they didn't expect me to do things outside of, even though I wanted to. But there was, do you understand what I'm saying? People understood that we all had, and there was a contract. I went, okay, look, he's going to be like that because he's an artist. We're not expecting to be like this. And that's the role that I think when I came back to this part of the world, I thought, oh, this is one of the cognitive dissonances going on, that people expect great art. They want all these things in their bedrooms, and they want all, like you said, I mean, the amount of flats I used to live in Leeds, I mean, all these lovely waterside flats now, and they all want these pieces of artwork in, and you think, well, and everyone goes, oh, they all look the same, and you think, well, that's because you're demanding the same, and it's a two-way process, and that's why I think creativity's got to be learned from the unleashed at the very early stage, so that people can understand both elements of the process, what it's like to create and what it's like to be letting creative people have their element and go with the flow.
Yeah, and I think also it's about being holistic. So you've got the left hemisphere of the brain, which is the linear, ordered, structured part of the brain. You've got the right hemisphere of the brain, which is the free-flowing, creative part. But you can have both, and it takes me back to what you were saying earlier, Tim, about the fact that, strangely, even with creative, mad art, there is a structure, and there is, you have to exercise patience. There's an element of patience, and I've got a really close friend who's an amazing artist. I don't know, he's not really the sort of person that would probably be up for talking on your show, but his art is just unbelievable. And I'm quite an impatient person, and I kind of want it all to be done, do it right now. And he was like, no, and he's the complete opposite to me. He's completely like the most patient person. He painted a piece of work that took him 7 years. It took him 7 years to complete it. He did it on tiny little panels. Each little panel is a detailed piece of artwork in itself, and then all these panels make one amazing piece of artwork. I'll have to send you a picture. I'll send you a picture of it later. But yeah, he's like, no, you've got to be patient. And he was constantly saying to me, you've just got to learn. He said one of the key things with being an artist is you have to learn to, just as you said, Tim, you have to know when to stop. So it's also when to know when a piece of work is finished. It's like, is it finished? Because when you go, sometimes it's when you go beyond the point of it being finished that you destroy it or it goes wrong. And it's like when I do portraits, people say, oh, why don't you could make a fortune, you can just do portraits. And I said, well, I could just do commission portraits all the time, but personally, and I'm not knocking anybody that does do commission portraits as a business or anything, that person who doesn't, I don't find that particularly exciting. I do portraits, but I do them in a visionary style. So I say to people, if you give me a picture and I'll just create it in a visionary manner. And quite often, and this is the funny thing, I'm a very impatient person, yet I can take ages on a portrait and they'll be going, oh, is it finished yet? And I'm like, no, it's not finished yet. And they're like, well, when's it going to be finished? And I'm like, I don't know. can't give you a date, I'm afraid. Might be next week, might be in 3 years' time. No, it's not that bad. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration. But yeah, it's hard. And I think we all embark on new things all the time. And if people see you even remotely successful at something, or that you've done something and they're passionate about what you've done before, and oh, that's brilliant, they can sometimes see you as a bit of a guru. Oh yeah, but you know, oh, I don't really want to contribute to that because you obviously know what you're doing, and I don't want to contribute with something because I might mess up what you've done. You know, like there's a lack of confidence. People think they're going to say something that sounds stupid, or because they've seen you've done something before. But like, we're always embarking on new things constantly, and it, even for the people that may seem like they've done something before, that they're a success at something, when they start something new, it's like when you go to, if you've ever been to like a training conference or something, and like there's always people that you think, oh, they know what they're doing, they look really confident, and I think, well, actually a lot of those people, when you actually talk to them, they're just as scared as you, and they're just winging it. They just appear confident on the surface, but actually they're not that confident. They still feel nerves and fear and concern that they might not get something right. But some people, I think, are just braver. So they just say, right, let's just do it. Let's just jump in. Just throw ourselves in at the deep end and just see what happens. And if it goes wrong, we'll just get the old drawing board out again, and we'll think of a new direction. And that, to me, is all you can do. There's no exact formula for anything, really, because there's always somebody that comes along and tries a new approach. There's always been a pioneer of something throughout history that has come along and tried something different that's never been done before, and everyone's gone, oh God, you don't want to do that, you're going to look really stupid if it goes wrong because it's never been done before. And they go, well, okay, then I'll just try it, and if I look stupid and it goes wrong, I'll just try something else. That's the difference, I think. But it doesn't mean those people aren't scared or that they don't feel the fear, but they somehow find the strength to push themselves a bit more and just say, right, I'm going to do it.
Exactly.
And bugger the consequences.
Exactly, Megan. I think the fascinating. I think one of the things you speak upon. I mean, again, I sort of spoke about it earlier on. I like to go out and, particularly, I mean, it relates to two parts of what I'm going to explain to you. Really, is that I like to go out and do particularly ink on paper, quite detailed sketches and stuff like this. And people go, "Oh, wow!" And I literally at times, will take my earphones out and say to people when I can hear them, say, "Look, hey, I wasn't born with this. If you talk, when I was often go back to what I was saying, when I was a 5-year-old, I looked at pieces of engravings and like Dürer and stuff and thought, wow, no, I couldn't do that. I had to learn it and learn it and learn it, and bit by bit. And the great thing, that's why I did do it, because I thought this is a really good patient way of learning something. And the older thing that's almost been forgotten in our culture completely is of the discipline of actually bit by bit, step by step by step, doing something. And the thing is, when you get to that, and you're quite right, mate, because I think one of the things when you do get to the point, like, whether they're all people, okay, maybe elements are fit, but one of the things that I've definitely found is that when you have stick yourself into a discipline, and particularly doing, that's what I'm saying, going to the very smallest, that's why I go down to like 0.1 pen, and I'm sitting there doing, really tiny little movements. Because once you start doing this and you build up something from a very small, and it takes a long time to build up, when you do it, and you have been doing it for like, a number of years like I have done, you become less fearful, because you think, hey, I can turn around quite confidently and say, hey, I've gone down a long road to learn this, and I'm damn good at what I do, not because of my innate genius, but because it's been a long, hard process. And it's like anything else, the more you do something, more confident it is, and then you have less fear, because you think, hey, this isn't been something that's just dropped on me from on high in a moment. I've done this, and you can actually point to people and say, hey, look, this is what it's going to take. And hey, I'm sorry, but to become a good pianist is going to take you 10,000 hours. To become a good engravist is going to take you a long time. But you can do it. And when you're doing it, you start to learn. I think it's one of the things about that 10,000 hour block, which is quite a well-known name. But in that process, once you go through the first 1,000 hours, you start to realize, okay, I've now mastered the musician or the artwork, and you start to build your own. And I think that's what the rest of the 9,000 hours are, is basically feeding as much as yourself into it, which is chipping away at things you think you hold on to, and letting yourself become more like water and fluid around yourself. And then by the end of the 10,000 hours, you're like, not only have you mastered your instrument, you go, okay, I can go with my creative flow and whatever it may be. So when I approach a canvas, I'm like, oh, great, because I know I've spent hours and hours and hours in doing tiny little engravings. I know when I go to the canvas, I can be pretty confident and be pretty free. But that hasn't just come from some instant moment, which is the thing that we're fed to in our culture. Everything's instant. That's the whole thing about our life. It's all, don't do any work, instant. And it goes back to what I was saying before. Creativity is something that's got to be unshackled. It's not. This is what I'm saying. I don't think it's something it needs to be taught. I think it's something within us all, but it's unshackling that and understanding the process. And it is we spoke upon it tonight, but I mean, how many times this conversation needs to be had everywhere. People need to have this understanding of what it means to be, to me, the essence of being human. And that is the essence of, like I said before, working a discipline, doing something step by step by step, being patient with it. Also, the duality of being free and letting your creativity go with it. And ultimately, when you, like I said before, when you are doing something and you are, whatever your discipline may be, then you can have less and less fear, because you know quite confidently, quite logically, with reason and rationality, go, hey, no, I'm good at this because I spent a lot of hours sitting there practicing this when everyone else was watching TV. So I can quite rightly go, hey, I can quite rightly, like you say, once you've done that desk slide, it goes back to the example you said before. Once you've done it once, you'll do it all over again, and it gives you, hey, I can do this. I'm confident. But that's because you've done it. You've jumped and you've done it. So that's why I always say everyone should understand that to master something is a discipline, and it is something. I mean, it loops back to I would love to, maybe one way we should maybe connect me and the artist friends you're talking about, because I've done a number of pieces like that. And one of the pieces of an oil painting I did, and I did it. It was again, when I lived in Leeds, it was just someone had thrown away this huge, great big oil painting. It was a cheap, just nasty thing. And I took it up to my little place where I painted, and I just covered it all in black thick paint, and I painted this whole grass scene, and it was called The Discipline of a Million Strokes, and I did it all in watercolor, and it just took me, and I think it took me 2 years, and it was just this great, almost like it became like a Zen process, and it was almost like the end part of it was exactly like, oh, okay, I'm now done. And it was, and I think there's a great joy in this. There's a great, I say to many, particularly artist people, I think it's a great, something that artists should definitely do. Go into a part of the art world that takes a long time, like you say, whether it's engraving or something that's going to take a long time, because it's honing your skills, which is all part of the process. Sorry, it's a very long-winded.
Yeah.
I was just talking. We're talking.
No, definitely.
We're talking geeky art stuff here.
Yeah, geeky art stuff. It go on into infinity. But yeah, I mean, I sometimes have like 3 or 4. I've got about 3 canvases on the go, and sometimes I'll just be flitting around backwards and forwards to them. And somebody came around the other day and said, "Why don't you just work on one, finish that, and then work?" I said, "Because that's just not how my brain works, unfortunately. Because when I'm working on another one, some creative thought processes enter my head about a different canvas, even though they're strangely unrelated. And then I'll literally leave that one and go to the other one, and that's how it works for me. Not all artists work in that way, but I tend to work on more than one at a time, often. But yeah, it's a hard one, knowing when to stop and think, right, that painting's finished. But then other times, and this is the weird kind of contradictory element to it, very with great clarity at times when you do certain pieces of work, you know exactly when it's finished, because I've had that too, where it's like, yeah, that's done, I know it's done, and you feel quite proud and pleased that you've reached that end point, and you're very clear about it. because it's sometimes it's you're not sure, you're kind of in that weird mode where you're not sure if it's finished or not, and you're thinking, do I just need to do that, or should I just leave it? And I think it's at that point when you're not sure is when you just think, right, no, I need to switch myself into something completely different. I need to go away from this completely, because I've entered into the realm of procrastination,
Yeah,
which can go on forever. But
exactly. No,
yeah,
exactly. I was just going to say, mate, because the opposite to this is, and I think once you step out of this is when you do create something. And this is the other end of it. Again, it's like one of the white elephants. And I try to listen to a lot of artists and podcasts and stuff, and no one ever wants to speak upon this. But to me, when you're an artist, there's two things. You become a collector of art or you become an artist. And this is one of the things that becomes most frustrating. Is you finish a piece of artwork and you just sit around and think, how many pieces of artwork have I got sat in here? And I know we could have a whole conversation about, hey, why don't people buy artwork? And I think that is another conversation. But equally, what do you do with those pieces of artwork? Because again, you think, I've done this for somebody else. So I say this because I was fascinated when you were moving, saying that you've given a lot of your pieces of artwork away. I've done the same. I'd rather have one of my pieces of artwork sat in somebody's room rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to hold on to it because in 10 years' time. That's just, I'm fascinated that you said that, because I've met artists who are the other way around, and you go into their studios and it's just wall to wall. The paintings are like, oh no, this is all going to, and they've got some weird calculation that in 20 years' time this is going to be worth like 60 million because of the appreciation and all that. And you think, well,
oh God, no. See, the way I see it, I think to myself, if I had some kind of legacy that I left behind, if I did by default of doing something else become well known as an artist, not because I'm desperately trying to promote myself as an artist, or like I want people to see me as an artist, because I do lots of different things. But if after I leave this dimension, there's pieces of my artwork that I've gifted to close friends and family and people, and then they have a valuable piece, that would be enough for me. I'm not particularly worried about benefiting from any sort of cash reward, if you want to call it that, from the art that I've got now, or that I've given to people. And that was my main reason was, as you said, I thought, I've got all these, and I have now, I've got yet another accumulation of artwork in my house, and I'm thinking, right, I'm gonna have to give some of this away again. But I'm thinking, if I could use my art in some positive way, in a collaborative way, which is obviously, can be used within the realms of the infinite imaginarium mind, possibly with your show, I would be happy to donate work and that was relevant to something that somebody was doing. Because to me, that would be the most beneficial use of my skill or my talent, would be to share the art with people. Because I think this whole thing about, this is another part of the society that I don't necessarily agree with on one level, is this whole thing about copyright and plagiarizing things. Because to me, the whole creation process of anything is about collaboration and the blending of things together to create something new. It's about blending things together. So that's my view. So I'm of the mind that I think I will share freely of my art till the day I die, and I'll say to people, you can have that image, you can do whatever you want with it, and you can profit from it if you want, and I don't mind, because to me, I'm happy to share it. Once I've shared it, then it's public domain, they can do what they want. But it's the reason I have that view is because I believe that we should blend things, that we have our art, and we can, by sharing our creations, we can create new things. It's kind of like the blending of two things together makes something new. You birth something new, and that's what it's all about. I think, to encapsulate where we're headed as humanity's headed at the moment, or what perhaps we would need to do to change some of the negative things in society, would be to collaborate on everything and share things, and don't think, oh, if I share my idea, and it might not necessarily be artistic in any way, it could be anything, it could just be an idea for something. A lot of people might think, oh, if I share that, then somebody might nick it, and then they're going to make money out of it. And I think, well, that's kind of the worst thing that you can think, because it's the sharing of ideas with other people that then creates these new amazing ideas, and that everybody can benefit from. So there's no hierarchical element to any of these collaborations, if that makes sense. There's no kind of hierarchical pecking order where people are the leaders and then there's the followers. Everybody's on a kind of an equal footing. There may be people that don't want a really majorly active role. They want an input, they want to contribute, but maybe they just want to do some sort of an admin role, or I'm just talking generally here about collaborating on projects. And there may be people that have a more active role of doing something specific, but it should really just be about choice, people having the choices to choose. And if they want to have a bigger input, then perhaps the pioneers of some of these things would welcome them in with open arms. Say, well, yeah, that's great, we want you to have a major role. If you want to create an epic piece of music, if you want to compose this music, we might, what I'm saying is, if you may have set up a group of people where you've all bonded and you've been together for a while and you've been working on a project, and then somebody comes into the group that you've only known for a short period of time, but you all bond with that person, and then they suddenly propose that they're going to do something amazing, this epic, then that's, to me, that's just brilliant. That's perfect. That's what we want. So it's just really, I guess, about being free and easy and welcoming ideas and being able to talk about things without coming to blows about, if you disagree about things, being able to sort of solve certain issues or things that perhaps aren't flowing well, or things that aren't working. It's like, if I created something for the Infinite Imaginarium, I know that and this is what's so amazing, the people that I've met, and I would never have met them if it hadn't been for minds or technology either, because obviously the whole thing about being able to connect with people all over the world and stuff, they could say, oh yeah, I really like it, but I think it'd be really cool if we change this, or because then this would be really good, or this bit of colour, or whatever. I would never take offence at that. I just find that whole creation process and connecting with other people really exciting. But I guess there are some people that would feel bad about that, that perhaps would. And I'm guessing that maybe that's the thing that we have to be aware of, that everybody's different and we're all on a different sort of stage of the journey, the evolutionary journey or the consciousness journey. And we just have to be sensitive of other people, empathetic of other people's disposition, if that makes sense. And I think really that's all that's needed. And I can't really see why things wouldn't flow and wouldn't be positive and successful. And I actually feel very optimistic about the time we're living through at the moment. I know there's all this external horrendous stuff going on around, so you could look upon it and say we're going through a very dark period. But I see it as we're sort of on the verge of major transition into a kind of a golden period of, light, as in light meaning information, information at our fingertips, knowledge sharing, and being able to learn things about us, about the human, species, and about parts of the brain that we don't use, and reactivation of those parts of the brain and all the rest of it. We're learning so much. And I think one of the great things about technology, because I know quite often we all talk about technology as being a negative thing, is the ability to learn things at such a rapid pace. Because what people are doing now, they're effectively becoming like speed readers, because obviously we scroll through so much information through a period of a day, and obviously people are staying up all night as well, which isn't necessarily a good thing, and we're sort of absorbing so much information. And that in itself, the fact that the brain's like a muscle, it trains the brain to be able to store more and more information. So effectively, by default, on the basis that we're scrolling and looking at things all the time via the internet, looking at the internet, our brains are becoming kind of supercomputers to be powerhouses to store all this information. So I think that in itself is kind of going to activate these dormant parts of the brain that we haven't used in the past. So I think overall it's a very positive time for humanity in the era that we live in, and I feel quite good about it.
I could spend hours talking upon this subject because I'll give you a bit of a real person to real person experience here. I mean, 20 years ago when the internet came around in 1994, I'm old enough to think. I remember being quite in my 20s thinking, this is it. We're going to connect all of us. We're going to have all this
Yeah,
information and
yeah,
basically my generation, we all just had kids, voted for Tony Blair, yada yada yada, Gulf War, Gulf War, Gulf War, and it all got sucked up into sort of 6 corporations, and we're at the point where it is now. So my point is now, and this is I relate to this right now. There's things like the blockchain and decentralized technology. Mines
yeah,
is a great example of this. N99, it's been the drive of what I'm trying to say. I had an idea 20 years ago what I wanted with N99, and it never happened. This time round, I'm like, I see this window of opportunity right now, and I speak upon this because I think it is, time is an illusion, all this sort of stuff. But right now, there is a short window opportunity for us creative people to shape something that if we don't do anything in 5-10 years time, this is all going to be taken over by the suits, and they're not going to let us run anywhere near this stuff. And right now we've got the ability. This is that's why I put the call out every week for to people to say, hey, I'm just an artist. I've got the very essence of what we've spoken upon tonight. Let's get something up. Let's use this technology. And this is where I've done step by step by step with N99, and this is why I put the call out every week to people, because if we can just get us all together, and there's ways and means where half of what we were just speaking about making decisions about copyright, that's all old school thinking. The new world isn't going to be about that. There's going to be direct ways where we can just directly reward people without any middlemen, and we can just form things. But the essence of it all, we all need to. So I keep trying to say every week, it's all okay, all these ideas, but my call is, and I'm old enough to be quite sort of passionate about this. There's an element among particularly creative people. They go, oh well, okay, yeah, I get all this stuff, but that's nothing to do with me. And they again, that's what I was relating earlier on. They think we're a bunch of artists and they're a bunch of coders, and we should never talk. And they're all building decentralized internet, and when it's ready, we'll all come along and use it. And that's not the way of thinking. That's the way of the fool. That's the way of, like you said earlier on. That's what Einstein said. You do something, and countless number of times, and you're still making a mistake. That's the very definition of a fool. And for that mentality of both the creative and on either end, to think, well, I'm a coder and I'm an artist and I'm a musician and we should never talk. We've got to get over that. And I use this. I use it a lot. It's like I've said before. If I could get 10% of the people, I've done 250 odd nearly these life people. If I could get 10% of the people that I've spoken to on this, that we all concur, have the same conversation over and over again. If we get just 10% of those people together, put our minds together, come to consensus, and build something in our own creative, whatever. And knowing all the things we've spoken about tonight, we could literally, right now, with the tools we've got, shift the world paradigm. But as I said before, it's like herding cats. And I get that, because we're all, as we said before tonight, I don't want it any other way. I respect to the nth degree that we're all individuals, and creative people are individuals. And of course, it's like, as I say, herding cats. A cat is an individualistic thing that runs around. It does what it wants to do. But we've got to find a way of bridging that and getting over our nature, like you said before, of not wanting to reach out to people. We've got to find a way where we can all come together, because we've got this opportunity right now. And that's why I say it so passionately, because if we don't do anything right now, this moment is going to pass, and before we know it, this is, like I say, we're taken over by the suits, and we'll all be sitting around scratching our heads. And it's I think before, it's like I say, quite sincerely, I think this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. But as I said before, there's no good like it is before with just one or two people doing it. It's what you're trying to do with Infinite, Imaginarium. It's what Minds are trying to do. It's what we're doing with N99. It's like the essence of this conversation. It's about just reaching out, and we've got to find ways and to connect, because this is what I'm saying. As much as there's a fearful moment if we don't do it, hey, on the other side of it, instead of being like, to use your analogy earlier on, instead of looking at the top of that hill and thinking, oh, it's a death slide and what could happen, think it's great. Let's just jump in and do this, because if we don't, soon going to discover this, and they're going to be doing it. Before you know it, you're going to be in a queue, and you'll be like, "Oh, I'm never going to get on this death slide." So it's about taking that, as we said, between me and you, private communications always is now. This is it. Don't 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 sort of fall back and wait for the future, because. And I can say this, that's why I'm talking to someone like yourself tonight, because I know you get this completely. So that's why I say we've all got to. That's what we can do. We can just keep putting the call out, telling each other, like we started this conversation about projects and things that we admire and that we use, and just keep flying the flag and doing what we're doing. And I just don't know. I think step by step, like we think the whole of any creative process, you just step by step, bit by bit, you walk away, whatever, all the things we talked about tonight. But as long as you're going and progressing, that's the method forward. And it's like anything else, the more momentum this gets, the quicker we can shift things. But that's a call out, and I think it's been a call out to creative people all around the world for a long time. And I think you quite rightly spoke upon. We've got right now the means at our fingertips where we can all connect, we can all come together, and it's up to us as what we do. And this is right the theme of our conversation is, I can't rely on what you're going to do, Meg. You can't rely on what I'm going to do. I can't rely on what anyone else is going to do, but I can rely on what I'm going to do. And that's what's all important is to all look, like you said before, look within ourselves and think, well, are we doing the best we can? Now look, Meg, it's crashing near midnight. We've been at this over 2 hours. Before we do sort of round this conversation up, maybe, I know, we've spoken, privately in conversations, you haven't got many places, a website for your artwork and stuff, but
I actually haven't got a website at all, but I did plan, in light of obviously with the Infinite Imaginarium and what's happening with that, because we're going to I don't know if you've heard of the Science and Non-Duality conference, which the one that we're all going to is in San Jose, California. So we're basically planning on making a film, light in the darkness. So, but again, it's a very new, it's new territory for us in many ways, and we're already in the process of collaborating on all of that. But in light of some of the things that we're doing to bring people in on that project, then I did kind of think I need to get a website up and running for my artwork and put some people, but not just my artwork. It will just be a lot of the Infinite Imaginarium related things that we're doing there as well. So there, on that basis, there will be something. I am going to set something up, but people do find it quite strange that I haven't got anywhere where they can view my artwork, and I'm like, I know it's a strange thing because I don't see it. I think it's because I don't really see it as a business. I don't do it as a way of making money. It's something I really enjoy. It's quite a private thing, but obviously I do share it with people. It's not something that I hide away and do. But I know that it would be beneficial for people, and people. I guess if you do these creative works, it's good to share them. The same as if you were a pianist and you could play beautiful music.
Mm-hmm.
What's the point if you're not going to share it with anybody? So yeah.
Exactly. But on that one, Meg, so if anyone's listening onto this conversation and they want to reach out to you, where can they find your minds and where can they find you?
Well, I'm working with on Minds known as Tori D and KDJH. We work on the Infinite Imaginarium, and my handle or tag is @Cartman1. So you find me on there. I am on Facebook as well. We've got the Infinite Imaginarium page, although on Facebook, which is relatively new, and I'm on Twitter. But I have to be honest, I don't use Twitter massively. I'm a bit, in some ways, a bit of a technophobe. Actually, I'm not on these things non-stop. But I'm mainly sort of working on the Infinite Imaginarium. But yeah, you can find me on Minds, and so if anybody wants to connect with us in regards to that, and they want to join in with our project, feel free. Anybody's welcome, as we've been saying, throughout the discussion. So that's what it's all about, the collaboration of ideas and goals and visions, and creating amazing things through the collaboration. That's the key to it all, I feel.
Well, perfect. I think that's a very zen way to finish the this conversation. Well, look, as again, thank you for the giving me your time tonight, Meg. I mean, I kind of like all great conversations. I'm left with many questions, and then it's kind of like we feel like we scratched upon the surface of a few things. I mean, I can't believe we've gone through this whole conversation. We haven't really discussed, linguistic programming
Oh
or some
yeah,
of the other things. There's
that's
so many.
my other thing. Yeah, I'm a
So many.
certified neuro-linguistic programmer, which that's a bit of a mouthful to say, but it's also, it sounds a bit sinister, doesn't it? Neuro-linguistic program. I'm going to program your brain, But no, it's not anything sinister at all. It actually, I'll just say really quickly, one of the reasons I did that course, I trained with John Grinder, who's one of the creators of NLP back in the 1970s. This could be another show that we could talk about, by the way. And it was partly a self improvement thing for my own, because I had my own sort of inadequacies and lack of confidence in certain areas, but I also felt it would be a good way to empower people so they could actually get their confidence back in their life and actually reprogram their brains to be positive if they weren't positive, or reprogram their brains to be confident. The brain is an amazing thing if people understood it. And with certain methods and techniques, you can retrain yourself to do amazing things and also activate parts of the brain that you've never even used, that are just there, dormant, not being used, which again, that might be another another show, another conversation.
Like I say, like again, the essence of any great conversation is wanting more. So there's plenty of things we can discuss and plenty of
Sure.
questions. But great, it's like I said before. Thank you for giving me your time tonight, Meg. It's been an absolute insightful conversation, and
It's been great.
I,
Thank you very much for Tim. Thanks for having me on. It's been great.
no
Cheers.
worries. And like I say, I think maybe to sort of kind of wrap this whole conversation up in maybe one sentence would be like, you are the brains of the central nervous system. I think we both concur on that one. Well, from
Yeah.
all the way over in Scotland and all the way down there in Bristol, I'm going to say life is people.
All right. Take care, Tim. Lovely to talk to you. Bye.
Life is people.